Hey, buddy, it's time.
The elites lie about Donald Trump. You don't believe me? Here's Nancy Pelosi herself saying exactly how they do it. Check it out.
A diversionary tactic. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
The elites lie about Donald Trump. You don't believe me?
Yeah.
The elites lie about Donald Trump. The elites lie about...
The FBI says that lights are blinking red, warning lights. National security experts say that there is an increased risk of a coordinated attack. Why? Because the Democrats are the party of open borders. Just last week, 8 illegal immigrants were arrested with ties to the radical, extreme, violent terrorist group ISIS. They were arrested in California, Pennsylvania, and New York. They came from Central Asia to Mexico, and from there easily came to the United States. Why? Because this open border policy of the Democrats has something called catch and release. Democrats, let me tell you, it is not working. You are releasing into the United States criminals, drug dealers, murderers, and now terrorists. The FBI says that lights are blinking red, warning lights. National security experts say that there is an increase.
Now let's check out these sisters dropping this knowledge as we see on Point Black PBN, Point Black National News, late in the Great Edition. So let's check out these sisters, you know what I'm saying, these goddesses bringing this fire, you know what I'm saying, to the track, and definitely jumping up on, you know what I'm saying, someone we need to jump up on for years ago to even now. But let's look at the way she handled this position. So without further delay, you know what I'm saying, let's look in. Hold on, people. Give me a part of the picture. You know what I'm saying? So now let's look in. Yeah, let's look in. As I was saying, I messed up right there. Let's check it out.
Jewish community and say, oh, you know what? He's going to put you back in the Holocaust. But you come over to black people and literally say something as ridiculous. This person is going to put you back in chains, and this person is going to take away all your rights, and this person is going to do that. When the fact of the matter is that everything that would actually put me in some type of a bind is 400% higher than it was 4 years ago. So if you want to talk about any type of enslavement, talk about the monetary
of black women is Congressman Maxine Waters.
Trump has told you who he is. He defined himself. He is a no-good, deplorable, lying, despicable human being. And he's talking about if he doesn't win, there's going to be a bloodbath. There's going to be violence. There's going to be a civil war. Who the hell do you think he's coming after? Who's going to be targeted? Who is he talking about? But you know he means business because he is the one that led the invasion on the Capitol January 6th. Now, do we have to talk about the difference between these two? Now, I want to tell you, no matter what anybody says, it ain't going to be no other Democratic candidate. It's going to be Biden, and we better know it. Where people are talking about Biden is too old. Hell, I'm older than Biden.
Let me show you. You look good, Congresswoman.
And I get up every morning.
All right.
And I exercise.
All right.
And I work late hours.
All right.
I take care of black people.
All right.
Maxine Waters is now 81 years old. She served U.S. Representative for California's 43rd District since 1991. 30 years. Before that, she was in the California State Assembly for 14. What has she done? What has she done for her district? I may start a firestorm with you guys, but I am no longer for all black women. Well, I'm for all black men. And let me preface this by saying I am married to a black man and I am raising a black son. But it's people like her, like Marilyn Mosby, like, all of the politicians here in Baltimore City that have stood by and become rich off the backs of black and brown people in their districts. These people don't give a damn about us. All they care about is power, staying in power, and they will do whatever it takes, whether it be to continue to race bait to us as black people, whether it be to go up and praise Joe Biden and all this stuff, whatever it takes, they will do to stay in power. I want to support my community, but I wouldn't support somebody like her because she don't care about us. She cares about lining her pockets. She's gotten rich while being in office. Her net worth is over $2 million.
It was probably actually north of $2 million. Her, James Clyburn, okay, he's another one who has successfully incorporated his family into his, whole political dynasty. His daughter was an FCC commissioner. So these people, they literally, these black politicians, most of them, act like literal overseers on a plantation that are designed to keep other blacks on that plantation. And they sell us this line. The thing that gets me is how they can go into these black churches and they can pantomime this black affect, okay? And what gets me is what resonates with a lot of these audiences is the notion that, if a Republican gets in, remember, Trump was supposed to send us back to Africa, okay? Mitt Romney was supposed to put us back in chains. Listen, if you're a black person and you are actually afraid of someone putting you in slavery, first thing you need to do is read the Second Amendment. And the second thing you need to do is grow up. Because they go to the Jewish community and talk about substantive issues, okay? Foreign policy as it relates to Israel, business, Asian community, economic development, Hispanic community, immigration and economic development. All they got to do is come into a black church, hum a few bars of an Hebrew spiritual, exactly, and tell us that if we vote for that guy, he's going to put us back in chains. And that does it.
That does it.
Black people. It's insane. It is absolutely insane. People need to wake up.
It works every time. One of the problems with Auntie Maxine when she was talking was that she talked about she's exercising and she gets up early. Well, the problem is that she's not running. Biden is, and he doesn't do those things. He is declining. So that's the problem. It doesn't matter what she does, okay? That's number one. Every year, every 4 years, certainly, the Democrats have been winning, if you will, against their own base on these same tropes that use the fear, the demagoguery, and it works. I've come to the conclusion, I think I said this last year, where I know what people mean. I know what we say when they say they're not voting in their own best interest. Actually, her base is, because they're voting to be get hands out from the government. They're voting to get the milk from the tits of the government cows. That's what they believe is in their best interest. If somebody is telling them they're going to feed them, they're going to clothe their children, they're going to feed their children breakfast, lunch, and dinner in school, you don't have to be a parent. I'll parent your child for you. Send them to this public school. And this is what they're telling them. We'll pay for daycare. Then they believe that that is in their best interest. What they don't understand, and seemingly never will, many of them, is that they will always be wherever that level is. They'll always need from the government. And who's paying it? Remember, the government produces nothing. They can only take compulsorily from those who do produce to give to those who don't produce. This is asinine, but these fear tactics and tropes work every time, and this is how they maintain their base. And one more thing, we've been talking about Black women for all the wrong reasons. Guess who their majority base, or that they can rely on for the Democrat Party? Black women. They are consistently Democratic voters, and that's who they rely on.
Yeah. What are your thoughts here, Megan, on that exchange with Maxine Waters?
You know, the level of frustration, I don't even know. I stopped singing the Negro National Anthem a long time ago because I believe in some type of futuristic speaking and manifestation. So if you're going to continue to sing with such great emotion that one day we'll be free, I have a problem with that, because you're still not free. What are you waiting on? What does freedom look like? If this is, then what will be free? And so when you have conversations like in 2024, anybody is going to put you in chains, just like you had said earlier. You don't go to the Jewish community and say, "Oh, you know what? He's going to put you back in the Holocaust." Mm-hmm. You don't do that, but you come over to Black people and literally say something as ridiculous. There's not even enough cotton to be picked at this point to put us all in slavery. Where are you going to get all the cotton from? It's ridiculous to even have this kind of conversation. And whether it was the right or the left saying it, I'd say the same thing. This is ludicrous. Why are you talking to me like that? It is exceptionally disrespectful to any type of intelligence that I have for you to tell me that this person is going to put you back in chains, and this person is going to take away all your rights, and this person is going to do that, when the fact of the matter is that everything that would actually put me in some type of a bind is 400% higher than it was 4 years ago. So if you want to talk about any type of enslavement, talk about the monetary.
Americans now collectively have over $1 trillion in credit card debt. This is the highest it's ever been, okay, because they are resorting to credit, okay, because, as Megan said, inflationary prices. So, these people come on television and say everything. Yeah, Mika and Joe say everything's good. They're getting millions of dollars of income flowing into their household. I go to the grocery store for me and my wife, and like I always say, $80 is the new $40.
So when I listen to Maxine Waters, that idea that they're a cult, I mean, she was speaking like she was a cult leader. And for her to say that something about Trump, something about him promising a bloodbath when he didn't mean it like that, if you really listen to what he said. Also that he somehow created the insurrection. She's a horrible, lying woman, because she is the one who actually said, when Trump was still in office, she literally said, if you see anybody from that cabinet, from Trump's cabinet, in the restaurant, in the department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. She literally incited violence. and she was speaking outside to a crowd of people. So, these people are lying, conniving, disgusting people. And yes, she's very, very old, and I can't believe that she's like a witch, really, like an old, haggard witch who cannot stop. Like at this point, you should just go. And no, it's like an urge. She needs to keep fighting because it's like evil in her. And this is how they are. It's very cultish. So I mean, it's. I can't even compare. Yes, in the Soviet Union, things were kind of similar. It's true that when Soviet Union began to collapse and people started to have different points of view and they began to argue, there were people who just, no matter what, like the country is falling apart. There's literally no food in the store, and they're still no. This is our idea. We have to stick to it.
Well, let me say this real quick, and it piggybacks on something that someone in the comments said. From the beginning, the Democrat Party has been a party of tyrants. All right, they're the party that actually fought a war and seceded in order to maintain slavery. This is in their DNA. It's one of the reasons why the Republican Party is lost, because the sole reason why they were originally founded was abolishment of slavery. After that was done, they've been wandering in the wilderness ever since. But we can't ignore the fact that one of the main reasons this might be the main reason that they don't want Trump in there is because Maxine Waters is a part of that military-industrial complex. You had no new wars started under Trump. You had him working to shut down the generational war in Afghanistan, crossing the DMZ, talking to Kim Jong-un. We talk a good game when it comes to peace, but then we got somebody who actually wanted to normalize relationships with Russia and didn't pump up the budgets and revenues of Northrop Grumman and Lockheed. And they don't like that. The establishment, left and right, do not like that. America has got to keep something going in terms of military conflict. And the fact that Trump was reluctant to do that is a big part of why they don't want him in office and will do anything to stop him.
Say the words concentration camps, and most will readily surmise the topic has to do with World War II and the Nazis. But this is really different. The hard labor, gruesome deaths, and barbarism here is about the death camp in Mississippi, United States. It shouldn't be surprising that America, with all its black hatred going on for centuries, has a death camp. But what is actually surprising is we never really heard about it or read about it. It is not even talked about in a whisper, in contrast to how loudly the German death camps are being talked about. The Devil's Punch Bowl in Natchez, Mississippi, USA, was where about 20,000 freed black slaves were thrown in to starve, to suffer, and to perish. 1863 wasn't a year of singular, horrific events, but a year that encapsulated the systemic evil black Americans faced. It was already horrible enough in the North.
Today, you don't mind the wait. You've got the all-new Caesars Palace online casino. Hundreds of your favorite games from your favorite...
It was already horrible enough in the North. Discrimination ran rampant. Segregated schools, limited job opportunities, and constant social exclusion were the hallmarks of black life. The violence was both physical and psychological. Whippings, beatings, and even lynchings were commonplace methods of control and had continued on the rise, regardless the Emancipation Proclamation, which was decreed during the Civil War. The Civil War was now over. Black Americans felt betrayed yet again to have trusted that the Emancipation Proclamation decreed by Abraham Lincoln was meant to change everything. It was a sham all along. They had become freed slaves for nothing. It was more or less the same, as they were literally denied all privileges that were due them on every front. This would compel these heartbroken black men and women to dust up and embark a mass relocation to where they had thought would be better and peaceful for them, only to meet the cruelest of fates there, mistreatments they never did face even when they were slaves. In this video, we are unmasking to you a sad history which has been so hidden that you most likely have never heard of it, one so dark that it takes you where forgiveness cannot be found. Before we continue, do kindly support our work. Hit the thumb button, share with friends and families, spread our eye-opening Black narratives for people to know better and become better. Without further ado, let us delve in. Somewhere in the foothills of Mississippi, the trees grow heavy with abundant uneaten peaches. So nourishing and big these peaches look that one would wonder why the locals do not eat it. Varieties of tales have haunted the Devil's Punch Bowl in Mississippi for decades, from pirates to plane crashes. While the land itself may not be full of treasure, it is haunted by the history of mass unalivings, terror, and a past filled with hatred for Black Americans that cannot be ignored. One particularly haunting case involves the hellish treatment of Black Americans who fled to Mississippi for refuge during the Civil War of 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 freed African Americans in rebel states, and after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment manumitted all U.S. captives wherever they were. Despite these proclamations, the reality for many newly freed African Americans was far from the freedom they had hoped for. Abraham Lincoln, an American lawyer, politician, and statesman who was later elected as the 16th President of the United States in the 1860s, issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. It was a decree stating that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states should be set free.
That on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free.
But a careful look into the Emancipation Proclamation would pop up some mind-blowing questions like, why did the whites suddenly want emancipation for the blacks? Weren't these the same people who despised the blacks so much? So what changed? And who were the people that stood behind the sudden reconsideration of the blacks' predicaments? Now let us dig in to find some answers to these puzzle-like questions. In 1861, 12th of April, the American Civil War had broken out. It was so intense that the Union was losing most of its population rapidly. Although the population of the Union was more than the Southern population, this didn't seem to give them an upper hand. The Northern states, also referred to as the Union states, had constituted 22 states, while the Southern states, also called the Confederacy states, were made up of just 11 states. In 1860, the entire population of the United States was 31.4 million, 3.8 million men, approximately 12% of the total population, were enrolled in the military service. 620,000 had died, that is 2% of the total population, in the war. Seeing this, President Abraham Lincoln knew that he had to do something. In the same vein, with his astute vision and keen mind, he had come up with the move of acquiring more manpower. Lincoln had figured that the only productive manpower which could have been readily available to salvage the sad end closing in on them were the black slaves on their shores. Abraham Lincoln had enticed the entire African American slaves with emancipation in a bid to get them to fight for the Union. This was called the Emancipation Proclamation, a decree set to liberate all slaves immediately. Things had worked out as planned by Abraham Lincoln. The Emancipation Proclamation idea had successfully lured the entire black slaves and their troops to the side of the Union. These blacks had fought loyally in a 2-year civil war against the Confederacy and had defeated them for the Union. They had fought for their belief in a brighter future where nothing other than racial and economic equality is the order. But after all said and done, the nation they had fought and won a war for was still unprepared to deal with the question of full citizenship for its newly freed black population. The Reconstruction implemented by Congress, which lasted from 1866 to 1877, was aimed at reorganizing the southern states after the Civil War, providing the means for readmitting them into the Union and defining how whites and blacks could live together in a non-slave society. The South, however, saw the Reconstruction idea as a humiliating, even vengeful, imposition and did not welcome it. The newly freed slaves were faced with an increasingly dire situation now. Many had neither education nor money, being denied both during their enslavement. They were often forced into sharecropping, renting land from their former owners and giving a portion of their crops as rent. This arrangement kept them in a cycle of grave poverty and dependence. These challenges had become overwhelming and unendurable. Starvation, segregation, beatings, whippings, killings continued on the rise. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 loomed large, forcing free blacks to live in constant fear of being recaptured and returned to a life of servitude. In this heat, about 110,000.
How do celebrities like Justin Bieber and The Rock generate hundreds of millions of dollars? It's actually not what you think. They make a special kind of money known as...
In this heat, about 110,000 freed slaves and escapees would be compelled to undertake a massive exodus from the northern part of the country. Many traveled through Natchez, Mississippi, seeking shelter and a new start. By 1860, the population of Natchez was about 6,612, including 4,272 whites, 2,132 freed slaves, and 208 free blacks. By 1870, the population had grown to 9,057, with 3,728 whites and 5,329 blacks. This drastic increase in the black population raised tensions in the city. The residents of Natchez, feeling resentful that the people who were once their property were now free, called upon the Union troops, who were still lingering after the war, to devise a merciless solution, the Devil's Punch Bowl. The Devil's Punch Bowl is a naturally enclosed area in Natchez City, Mississippi. It got its name from the unique appearance it carries, resembling a bowl-like hollow. This camp, located at the bottom of a cavernous pit with trees on the bluffs above, was seen by the Union troops as the perfect place to harbor their captives. According to Don Estes, historian and former director of the Natchez City Cemetery, the Union decided to build an encampment for the freed blacks at the Devil's Punch Bowl and walled it off so that there'd be no escape for any of them. The Devil's Punch Bowl consisted of 3 camps, all used by the troops to imprison these already freed black slaves and put them in conditions far worse than those on the plantations. This was another concentration camp. Men were made to do unthinkably hard labor, while women and children were left behind in the camp and usually deprived of food and water. The harsh weather conditions, arduous work, malnutrition, and poor hygiene would lead to a variety of health problems, fatigue, smallpox, and other insane diseases. Experts estimate that in just 1 year, more than 20,000 freed black people died at the Devil's Punch Bowl. The death rate was so incredibly high that these prisoners had begged the troops to let them go back to the plantations, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Paula Westbrook, historian and paranormal researcher, explained that the Army didn't let the black people remove the bodies of the deceased from their midst. They just threw down some shovels and told the prisoners to bury the bodies exactly where they died. But these prisoners had already become too tired and enfeebled with incessant suffering, thus were unable at this point to dig reasonably into the ground to properly cover their dead ones. The increasingly decomposed bodies caused more diseases, and more deaths struck the camp. Regrettably, this story, like so many others, has been drowned beneath a ravine filled with pain and suffering. The United States has proved to have a deep-rooted history of racially motivated mass killings that were frequently denied and went undocumented by authorities. As James Baldwin stated in 1963, American history is longer, larger, more varied, and more terrible than anything anyone has ever said about it. James E. Yateman, a bank founder and philanthropist of the Western Sanitary Commission, visited the Devil's Punch Bowl in November 1863 and wrote an appeal to President Lincoln regarding the condition of the formerly enslaved black Americans. Yateman had written thus: 75 died in a single day. Some returned to their masters on account of their suffering. Despite the tedious and backbreaking jobs that were assigned to them, they were usually killed on a daily basis. At least a record of 20,000 deaths of men and women were recorded in a year. Without any hint of remorse or sympathy, the Union troops continued to mistreat these black Americans, not giving them any chance to leave the camp, not even to bury the dead. The dead were buried wherever they dropped, as commanded by the troops, and they had continued dying. As Westbrook noted, the people who dreamed of building their lives away from the master's whip ended up owned, tortured, and enslaved once again. They never got the chance to build their businesses, amass wealth, and provide a good life for their offspring. They never got to experience true happiness, true freedom. As at today, occasional flooding by the Mississippi River brings out skeletal remains from the mass graves that adorn the former encampment. This proves that there was indeed a plethora of death there at some point in time. Not just this, to substantiate the fact that most blacks were killed in the camps, let's take a look at the bluffs in the Devil's Punch Bowl. They're known for their massive abundance of wild peach groves, but these peaches remain uneaten by the locals, even till date. This is because the locals are conscious of the evil carried out by their progenitors, even though they tried their best in trying to convert the entire chronicle of events into their favor. They couldn't just ignore this truth. Eaten fruits fertilized by the flesh and blood of innocent humans? Nah, that would be way too extreme. Carefully considering the entire happenings in the 1860s reveals every possible reason there should be reparations made to the entire black community, which does not even make up for the lot. There are no questions anymore as to why blacks have been the targets of such hatred throughout the entire history of the Americans. The hatred is reasonless. It confirms blacks have often been that strange fruit hanging from America's trees, as Billie Holiday famously sang. It explains why black people are overrepresented in prisons, why legislation in favor of black progress takes so long to pass, and why that progress is often quickly reversed by what Dr. King called white backlash. A painful yet important truth is that blacks were never intended to be citizens of America. They were never intended to own land, become political leaders, or contribute in meaningful ways to help the country. The Americans never planned on considering blacks as humans or citizens. They believed these people existed to serve and enrich white enslavers, to be the property of those who could afford them, and to be used as collateral when necessary to secure other enslaved blacks. This was why the Confederate States fought so hard to maintain the institution of slavery. The reality of the Devil's Punch Bowl and many other similar camps is a stark reminder of the horrors that freed black people faced even after the abolition of slavery. Abigail Cooper, an assistant professor of history, researched the experiences of African Americans in refugee camps during the Civil War. Over 200 refugee camps were established at that time, with more than 800,000 African Americans passing through them. These camps became places of monumental transformation for black people. It was a time when the black community started to see America not as an enslaver, but as their home. The camps, however, were far from what they envisioned. The conditions were grim, disease was rampant, and people lived in constant fear of raids from white Southerners. Many white people also sought shelter in these camps, but they were treated differently from blacks. They received more rations and better treatment over the blacks. Despite these unrelenting hardships and struggles, these camps would serve as a safe haven, where these blacks could still endeavor to experience what it feels like to be free, what it feels like to not be the property of a fellow human, what it feels like to start up what could be called a home. Families reunited, and people from various cultures and traditions came together. Some camps had access to education. For many black people, a good pair of shoes was a crucial possession. During slavery, slave owners would lock their shoes at night to prevent escape. Having shoes was essential for the journey to the camps, as it was easy to spot an escapee without them. Refugees found creative ways to protect themselves. Some even crafted makeshift footwears from plantain leaves, which had a strong smell that helped throw off the scent of the hounds used by patrollers and former owners. The journey to freedom was long and fraught with danger. Racial terror and lynchings were common, and many black people were brutally injured or killed. These retaliatory killings were often unaccounted for, but left a lasting impact on the black community. In remembering the Devil's Punch Bowl, we confront a painful chapter of American history, but we must do so to ensure such atrocities are never repeated. The suffering of those who were imprisoned, starved to death, and forced into labor to the breakdown in this cruel encampment must never be forgotten. Their plight serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of racial oppression and the long struggle for freedom and equality. As we reflect on these events, we are reminded of the words of Martin Luther King Jr. Injustice anywhere hurts justice everywhere. We are all connected, and what affects one person directly affects everyone indirectly. This should be a call to acknowledge the past, strive for justice, and work towards a future where every individual shall be treated with dignity and respect. That brings us to the end of yet another enlightening video. Like, share, and reach out to...
These representatives include Glenn Gruenhagen of Glencoe, Eric Lucero of Dayton, Shane McClure, Tim Miller of Princeburg, Linda Runbeck of Circle Pines. I am joined by 9 Minnesota State representatives in making these requests, and I think there's 6 here today. These representatives include Glenn Gruenhagen of Glencoe, Eric Lucero of Dayton, Shane Mecklin of Clear Lake, Tim Miller of Princeburg, Linda Runbeck of Circle Pines, Cal Barr of East Bethel, John Poston of Lakeshore, Dwayne Quam of Byron, and Jeremy Munson of Lake Crystal. We are making this request on 3 direct grounds. First, Representative Omar improperly and deliberately filed for a tax status for which she was not qualified, an illegal action in both federal and state law. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board found on June 6th of this year that she illegally used campaign funds to pay a law firm to review her tax records. The Campaign Finance Board exposed crystal clear probable cause for a tax fraud or tax evasion investigation when they discovered that Representative Omar filed as married and filing jointly with Mr. Ahmad Hersey in 2014 and 2015. During those years, she was legally married to Mr. Ahmad Elmi. Did the illegal filing produce a lower tax liability for the couple? Did her illegal tax filing bring her tax exemption for which she was not legally qualified? Usually people choose the tax filing status that yields them the lowest tax liability. Also, the board shared that the couple filed jointly during 2 specific years. Ilhan Omar and Ahmad Hersey have been together as a couple for 17 years. Given her record of crimes and violations of so many laws, it may be worth evaluating her claims of status in those other years as well. Second, Representative Omar lived together simultaneously with her first and second husbands at the same addresses in Minnesota and North Dakota in 2009 through 2011. The tax enforcers may need to check if she used an illegal tax filing status and obtained tax deductions, including standard deduction levels for which she was not qualified in those years. Third, we know that Representative Omar took improper kickbacks from 3 Minnesota colleges in 2017 when she oversaw their state budgets in 2017. Under campaign pressure, she returned those kickbacks in 2018. It is worth checking to see if she reported the kickbacks as income in 2017 or deducted the paybacks as expenses in 2018. 5 grounds for an investigation include corruption in public office and tax evasions on grounds of illegal filing status, improper deductions, concealed income from kickbacks, and improper claims for expenses. We are also aware of Representative Omar's pattern of improper conduct. She has been fined by the Campaign Finance Board for diverting campaign funds for an unpermitted political trip to Orlando. She has been directed to pay back her expenses for uncovered political trips to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Florida, and Washington, D.C. She has been punished for conversion of campaign funds to pay for personal legal and accounting services. She has flouted laws regarding the filing of her personal financial data in a way that distorted the political campaign process. On June 25th, I asked my Congresswoman Angie Craig to launch an investigation into these improprieties. That went nowhere. She said, do it yourself. So on July 23rd, I asked the U.S. House Ethics Committee to investigate Representative Omar. That request is currently being reviewed by the Office of Congressional Ethics. On that same day, I launched OmarTruth.com in an effort to rally Minnesotans and Americans to help bring political pressure to bring about a congressional investigation.